Welcome back to Deep in State. I'm your host, Nick Hawks. On today's show, we have Santi from Inversion Capital. He's going to be talking about some stuff relating to Helium. This episode is sponsored by Gold Hawks and Associates, the most experienced deep consultancy in the space. We help projects develop strategy, messaging, and token incentives. We'll have a little bit more on us later in the show. Before we get started, make sure you hit like, subscribe, smash the bell, all the things that help us bring great guests like Santi to you. Santi, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Nick, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I am super pumped. Max had told me about this thing. I'm not as much on the mobile side, so pretty cool. And I thought to come in to this as a guy who knows obviously a little bit about Helium, but making sure that we explain what's going on and what you guys are proposing. So maybe we start with like the real basic stuff, and then we'll get into why you're doing this thing. What are you guys proposing?
Yeah, we initially one proposal. It will be structured as two. The first one is having Inversion be a service provider. We have our desire is to deploy a Helium network in international markets.
Okay.
We believe that it is explosive. The technology, what we've seen in the US, is a great proof point, and we're inspired by that, and we want to go do it in other places. And so that is the TLDR for that proposal. And the second component, the second proposal is, there's a few things, but I think the most important one is to shift from a fixed to a variable pricing. Currently fixed at 50 cents per gigabyte.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that it is, in conversations with the Helium folks and others, and our understanding of other markets, is that it probably is more sensible to think about it on a variable manner as a discount to the prevailing wholesale rate that exists in a particular market.
And why is that? Walk me through that.
Well, of course, there's a limitation to that. You never want to go super low, probably below 15 cents or something around that range. Now, naturally, that's not a market that we would be interested in deploying that. There's just some markets that are not interesting or exciting. However, the first market that we are actively looking at is Mexico. And that has a slightly lower wholesale rate than the US.
Mm-hmm.
And we are just simply proposing whatever similar discount that exists in the US, say the prevailing wholesale rate is $2, Helium's at 50, take that discount and apply it to another market, like Mexico.
Okay.
And we think it just sort of aligns more on the economic side of things. We still think that it's compelling. Again, we can think about, is there a lower end of the range that you never want to go below X? I don't know what that is, candidly. But again, I don't think we'll get there, because in some of these markets, like particularly Southeast Asian markets, like the wholesale rate's very low, and I'm not interested in going to those markets anyways.
Got it. Okay, so Mexico is one of them. Are there others that you can talk about?
Oh, for sure. Brazil is super interesting.
Okay.
You're already seeing it, like Nubank launch an MVNO very successfully. The Nubank space, the telco industry, particularly in Latin America, is going through a very big transition, which I find really interesting from a timing perspective. But Brazil is a really interesting market. Argentina is a really interesting market. I've looked at the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting-ish, but not as interesting. What I like about Latin America as a whole is that our strategy is DePIN plus stablecoins is explosive. The DePIN angle serves as the best onboarding mechanism for non-speculative use cases of crypto. The user base that exists in Latin America is very much interested in, and will be interested in, a stablecoin, a tokenized dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a big component of the playbook for us. And so in the UK, marginally so, it's perhaps more competitive. The stablecoin usage, the activation of I don't get as excited as activating the user base that is using mobile services with stablecoins and others. And the other market Switzerland is also a funky market. Like if you look at like basically wholesale rates across the world, and some of this data is pretty sparse, but we've gotten a hold of some of it. There's certain outliers like the US, Switzerland, the UK, Australia, Canada, where the wholesale rate is like actually quite high. There should be like some correlation as the more developed the country is, the more the lower the wholesale rate is. But like
Yep.
these are certain anomalies for a cable. Like there's just a whole variety of reasons why that's the case. But that's how we kind of inverted, no pun intended, to like just think about which markets. Like just look at markets that are decently developed, but the wholesale rate's quite high. Like, okay, let's go look at those markets. I grew up in Mexico, and so naturally Mexico is more interesting to me because a big part of getting and deploying the network is finding distribution partners that you can get to scale fairly quickly. Like the whole point of what we're trying to do is I never want to build distribution. I want to find a partner that allows me to deploy hotspots, and get the density and coverage as quickly as possible.
And in a way, if I'm reading some of the tweets right, is that you're saying, hey, I think the quote is, instead of trying to convince businesses to adopt crypto, my team will acquire them and then transform them. So it's just saying, hey, we're not even going to talk about crypto going in. We're just going to buy what you're doing and do it better using crypto, and you'll never see it. Am I getting that right? Or is there
Absolutely.
there's some part
of that, and that's the beauty of DePIN, right? So say you buy an existing MVNO and they're buying per gigabyte, the COGS side of the house, like, is, what is it, 40% of up to 60% of the entire cost structure of an MVNO. Call it half of it is data networking costs. The
Mhm.
other half, or however efficient you are, is customer acquisitions. Now, if people might be familiar with Mint Mobile, like this is Ryan Reynolds MVNO. Well,
Mhm.
why does that work? Because someone like Ryan Reynolds, a celebrity, lowers the customer acquisition costs. But the thing that you can really, the most MVNOs are not thinking about is lowering that wholesale cost. And that's exactly right. My thesis is that, as opposed to trying to convince an MVNO to do it, I want to buy an MVNO that already has a user base, already has an
Yep.
existing business, and I'll deploy the Helium network, deploy the hotspots, and start offloading to capture that arbitrage. And that has a very material cost efficiency to the business.
Mhm.
The business is totally transformed. I mean, most MVNOs that I've looked at have a less than 10% EBITDA margin. What I get so excited about now is you go and buy an MVNO, you run this playbook, all of a sudden EBITDA margin goes to 20%. And
So
the
that's a big
world
difference.
and the industry is looking at that and says, "What have you just done?" And I'll say, "Oh, just one thing." And it's crypto. You're not gonna like the answer. It's crypto, and it's this thing called DePIN. And I think if we do it successfully in the way that we try to do it, I think it will finally be that moment where people appreciate the true potential of what crypto is, far beyond Bitcoin.
Yep.
And what you believe, people in the industry believe, which is this is like the settlement layer of the internet. This is just a way to do faster, better, and cheaper. It's technology, like the best technology is invisible. It's felt, but it's invisible. People
Yep.
don't know how
It's
it
useful.
works, but and so I think it's time for someone to do this. And I just got tired of trying to convince people. I've been mostly on the investing side. I was a Parify. We were very early in DeFi. We felt that, blockchains are, state ledgers, and they lend themselves to transfers of value. And you're sitting there, you're talking to banks, and you're talking to funds, and you're talking to other investors, and, fintechs and whatnot. And you pound the table for 10 years, and, we've done some traction as an industry. There were credible blockers as to why this technology hasn't been truly adopted: regulation and technology. Now, I think both of those are largely gone.
Yeah, I mean, we're recording this January 21st, after one of the more insane weekends in kind of crypto and meme coin history. So pretty wild to see how the whole thing is changing, especially with the new administration coming in, signaling pretty clearly that crypto is an okay thing. You've said the lines between mobile and fintech are blurring. You're coming at this from kind of this fintech background. Just walk me through what you mean by that and what the implications might be for us normal folks.
Absolutely. If you look at Nubank is probably the best example of this. Nubank is a fintech that started, like a neobank that started in Brazil.
Mhm.
Brazilian users are very internet savvy. They're young, so the Nubank got a tremendous amount of scale. Um, and then they realized, well, why do we stop there? We have all this user base. We can activate them. We can sell mobile plans. And then why do you stop there? Well, we have this thing called stablecoins. And everyone in Brazil, as everyone in the developing world, wants to hold dollars. And I think that's instructive in how the world is going to move, right? I don't think that my thesis is, as opposed to Nubank, it was fintech, then MVNO, then stablecoins.
Mhm.
You collapse all that. You do an MVNO plus stablecoins. And I grew up in Mexico. I'll tell you, everyone wants to own dollars. And there's just so many users out there that don't know how to do it or don't have a way. And it's simple friction points like an easy, intuitive wallet. Now, I've come to the more I've looked at businesses, to your point earlier, of which ones you can buy that have good distribution, transform them with crypto rails. Like go in, replace infra, put crypto rails. I've come to the conclusion that the best business that you can do, at least now, is an MVNO that has a lot of users, that you can run this playbook. You live with a customer 24/7.
Yep.
You have an app where they pay for services. The ability to incentivize them is extremely powerful, to incentivize them to pay in stablecoins for the mobile plan by offering them a discount. To
Yep.
then, once they have a stablecoin, you offer them the whole slew of products, which is yield opportunities, and access to other stuff that exists, through, that is possible once you're onboarded, right? But it doesn't. What I like about this, you're not leading with, "Hey, here's a stablecoin, here's a meme coin." That user is purely thinking about speculation.
Right.
What I care, and what crypto hasn't really seen, is that high LTV user that doesn't care if Bitcoin's at 100,000 or 30,000. He's here because you're giving them and you're servicing them a mobile plan at a discount, very compelling mobile service. And then they just so happen to then understand stablecoins because they're paying, and they're getting a discount on the mobile plan by paying in stablecoins. And once they have that, oh, well, you are tapping into the largest remittance corridor in the world, which is US Mexico.
Oh, really? It's
It's
that's the
the
biggest.
largest. And so, by the way, the ability to incentivize the on ramp into crypto, primarily stablecoins, is so strong because, again, you can do it in a very sustainable manner because you've saved so much cost on the business. That business, you again, you went from 5% EBITDA margin to 20. There's a lot of room there to incentivize, to acquire customers.
Yep.
And I just let me ask you a question. So people got very excited about Base. Coinbase has hundreds of million, 100 million customers, registered customers, not actives. How many of those customers do you think are purely there because they want to punt the meme coin, buy a crypto asset, and how many of them go away in the bear market?
I'm going to guess a lot of people go away in the bear market, but
you know what I mean? Like the entire funnel of crypto has been that.
yeah. Yep. Yeah, it
And
goes in and out. It's just it gets super fat and super thin.
my proposition is I want to invert that, and I want to
Yep.
bring. This is the only way that I've come up with to tap into that much larger, interesting user base, which is offer them a critical service by mobile, which is access to, mobile
Access
service,
to the world, right?
access
And
to the
it's
world. Like this is an extension of your body. You use it, you travel with it all the time. And I think that type of customer is the best customer, and they will most definitely love crypto, most definitely love stable coins. And we have an entire economy and services. No, they will. Like
yeah.
stable coins are a killer product.
I think once they get past the initial piece of saying, hey, this is crypto and being scared of it, and we may see that there's a pretty significant flip happening right now in that, where for the last couple of years, it's always been like, crypto is still kind of, maybe it's not drug dealer money, but it's still kind of dirty. And now we're seeing like, oh, it's actually something useful. And I think you've said, what is it? The biggest friction points in business models stem from coordination issues that show up as higher operating costs, capital expenditures, and degrading unit economics, which we talked about at the top of this. But to your point, I think once people see that crypto makes basically their life easier, better, faster. And I don't think we're totally there yet. I mean, I just had a buddy of mine come down the other day and he's like, dude, how do I get this crypto from this one wallet to the other? And I showed him how to do it and he was out of Solana. So I sent him some Solana. So he Venmo'd me something back. And Venmo is still easier than crypto right now for non-native crypto people.
For sure. I agree with you. There's a lot of stuff that has been done. I think my focus is to create a very unified experience for the user. He doesn't have to leave. My mental model is Tencent. Tencent in China basically is the everything app. It started as a chat, social like WeChat, and then they've expanded into everything. You order food there, you have a bank account, you stream movies, everything. And so I think the obviously there's different experiences if you're in Ethereum L1 L2 construct Solana, but I hear you by and large. Like there's a lot of fragmentation, as a on the user side. But where we're focusing a lot is creating a wallet experience that is very easy, intuitive, working with local partners to have a seamless on and off ramp, and then really leading with stablecoins. Now, if the user then wants to venture and learn about other things, for sure, that's fine. But just the stablecoin, really nailing the stablecoin experience, seamless on and off ramp, and money moving at the speed of light with fraction of what it costs them to send money to relatives in the US. Like that use case alone is explosive. It's transformative. And I think people really would appreciate that, because the current alternative is going to Western Union or some other bank provider, getting hosed on FX fees, getting hosed on transfer times and costs. And I think that's, you asked me why I'm doing this, like that's really what motivates me, because I do think that, like, should these remittance corridors be as large and lucrative for people? Absolutely not. Now, there's other interesting things. Once you have a platform business like an MVNO, you become a fintech. I think like the combination of these businesses allows me to, perhaps I'm not going to make as much money on remittance flows, but I'm making more money on, I'm compensating that because I'm acquiring more users to the MVNO, and then oh, by the way, I can tag on other services because you become the everything app for that user.
It's like
And
the
I think
gig economy for institutions, for sure.
Exactly. And so I'm willing to compromise margin on one area of the business to create just a unified, beautiful and seamless experience for the user. As a whole, that ARPU for the user goes from $4, $5 to 15, 20, 50 if I wanted to. If you do this right, you can really tap into more wallet share that customer is currently not spending, because you're just selling them, mobile service. Why stop there? I just don't think that.
If you're in their pocket all the time, you might as well help them.
Exactly.
Love it. Santi, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. Yeah. I know this is a big, giant thing. I want more people to pay attention to it. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing what you're doing with us.
Nick, thank you so much. The last thing I'll say is, obviously, in a lot of discussions with the Helium team, we will most likely do an AMA and the Discord channel. Of course, things are moving, and we'll capture a lot of the questions I'm sure people will have. There's also going to be a lot of opportunity to get people in the community involved. I've talked to the folks that did the deployment in Mexico, the pilot deployment in Oaxaca, very competent guys. So this is just a word out to people in the community. We're looking to get people involved. If you are interested, it's obviously a Herculean task, but deploying a network in Mexico and other markets, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people in the community to get involved and leverage their know-how and expertise in particular markets. So feel free to reach out, and you'll find us on Discord too.
Love it. I'm super excited to see where you take it. Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Nick.